going to go ahead and call our Community Development Committee meeting to order. First up is public comments. So if there's anyone from the public who has comments about anything that is not on our agendas tonight, now would be the time to make those comments. All right, next up is public presentations. We don't have any on our agenda tonight. And next is action items. We have one action item, which is Emily's phone music, which is the Broadmoor design conception resolution, which Emily, I believe, will be presenting to us.
That's right. So we're going forward tonight with a formal action item on the Broadmoor design that we discussed at our last meeting. This is a design concept resolution to sort of just outline the key points in the design and scope of the Broadmoor project that is scheduled for construction in 2019. It is a section between Martway and Johnson Drive. There is one revision to the cost. We've been starting kind of our sharpening of pencils and talking about the specific details of the construction design since our last meeting and since the design has been modified. So even from what was in your packet, we have newer numbers, and those are reflected in the revised number in the resolution that is before you. So we are up $89,000, still underneath the original budget of $1.3 million, and that will, fluctuate a little bit as we get even more specific, but it reflects stormwater improvements and the whole scope of the project as envisioned. So it
is this the last rendition after when we had the public hearing and we went back and forth? We had the first initial and then we had the second.
That's right.
This was kind of a culmination of both.
Yes. Known as option 2. That we discussed at the last meeting. Yeah.
Do you have any discussion? You could state your name and your address?
Yes, Josh Thede, 5911 Reeves Road. I'd like to reiterate some of my comments at the public forum from August, I believe it was, and those comments involved in pedestrian safety and bicycle safety along this route. I know that's a big priority of the city of Mission and the Communities for All Ages. Initiative that's been ongoing for the last quite a few years. And there's big improvements in this design concept, and I really appreciate all the things that are going on with the green space and the accessible ADA sidewalks. But there's still some things that aren't quite all the way there to a vision that I think Mission should aim for when being pedestrian friendly. The main thing is that these lanes are still 12 feet wide, which is a ridiculous width, in my opinion, for lanes. The average car is 6 to 6.5 feet wide, and I've even got a quote here from a document from Mark, and I'd just like to read it for you. In locations where the vehicle speed ranges from 20 to 30 miles per hour, the travel lanes can be reduced further from 10 feet or to 9 feet or to 10 feet or even 9 feet if allowed by local standards, and the local standard would be set by the city here. So I would encourage this project and future projects to continue thinking about narrowing those lanes so it's less distance for the pedestrians to travel across the street, and overall safer because the cars are going slower in those narrower lanes. I would also keep advocating for the furnishings for bicycle parking facilities, benches for pedestrians to rest. I know we've got a lot of elderly neighbors in that area, and it's important to accommodate all ages throughout our community. And so furnishings for bicycle and pedestrian activities would be great to keep advocating for.
Yeah, sure.
Brent, I don't know if you can answer this for John. Did any proposal come in defining the lanes at anything less than 12 feet?
No.
I don't know if this would be the best question for Laura on where we're at with the design plan. Is that something that could be discussed with the design still, or?
We haven't gone to final design yet. question is, I think we can talk to Olson, but the question would be, what are you going to do with the additional wood that, you know, that you would pick up?
Wider sidewalks, more green space.
We moved away a bit from the full-on, you know, like the bike lanes, thinking that single parking on the street and, you know, further redevelopment of the corridor, you know, wasn't ever going to be the perfect bike lane scenario, so we weren't pushing that. But the narrowing of the lanes on its own, for its own merits that Josh mentioned, was not discussed as an independent value.
Even if we thought about, even if we considered narrowing of the lanes, we would have the same needs that we had before, and I don't know if did the business owners or the people who would attend it, what kind of feeling did we get from how they would use that space?
I think it's a new conversation actually, because I think we were really talking about what would impact, you know, backup curb and up to them, and what would impact their personal parking lot. So actually this coming, I mean, we didn't talk about it for its own sake, like Josh is mentioning now. So I think their primary concerns were you're touching, you know, private property and what comes out, you know, right outside my storefront. If we wanted to talk between curbs about what we wanted to see that was different from the proposed design, we could.
Olson could probably speak a little better to this, but it's not just that one segment, it's an entire corridor of Broadmoor from essentially 61st Street all the way up to Broadmoor, I guess where it comes around Barkley.
Is Olson,
So,
from Olson here too?
no. So I'm just thinking about people driving through, it would change the difference in the size of the lanes, a little more than how that impacts traffic.
Any other comments, thoughts?
And are there any other ADA concerns that have come up with this design versus the first one? I know the first one seems to be a little bit more, well, more pedestrian friendly though, and I just don't know if there are any other ADA concerns that have been raised or...
No, I think really that, I mean, all of the designs that we've looked at have addressed some of those issues, because particularly there at the Popeyes corner, I think there's a fire hydrant that sits in the middle of the sidewalk, and so really a lot of things have been addressed at that intersection and that corner. So I don't think there have been.
And you have improvements of, you know, the grade and delineation and the, you know, throughout that don't exist now.
And just to be completely transparent, it would help if this is an issue that came up, that somebody check with Olson and find out if they looked at other options before.
Sure.
Even though it wasn't put as a proposal option, they may have looked and there may be a rationale for the size. So
I think we just didn't push the issue, but we could get their responses, especially the interplay between the other blocks and just the consideration of that.
What's our timeline for this? Weren't we trying to get something together?
Yes, we wanted to sort of hit, so we've scheduled for 19 construction, and it does us good to get out to bid sooner rather than later to be ready when the weather turns for construction season and be competitive with bids before our schedules fill up. So it does already need some adjusting from our original timeline, but we were hoping that through the next couple of months we would be finalizing design and being prepared to get a request for bids out on the street in the next.
I think before the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Right after the first of the year, we're discussing that with Olson. So we would have, so once the council approves a final design concept, then they will move to final design documents, get things ready for bid. There's some right-of-way acquisition and easement acquisition that needs to occur. That can be done generally simultaneously with the documents being out to bid. And then we would have to approve a CARS interlocal. But as Emily said, I think from the funding perspective, from CARS, they want us to construct in 2019. And I think we're on track to do that, but we want to position ourselves so that we can get the most competitive bids and quotes that we can.
is it fair that we just ask Olson when they first came up with it and come back with an answer? Because I know he sits on sustainability.
No, absolutely.
Looking at all the options for them.
Yep.
And following up on Nick's ADA question, because I know we've had the discussion about how this design doesn't fully comply with code. Is it fully ADA compliant, or has it just made improvements?
I had not heard anything that was lapsing in ADA.
Okay.
I think that was fully in place.
Great.
Yeah.
So, to get to council non-consent?
Yeah, I think so.
Right, and next up, we have one discussion item on our agenda this evening, which is our quarterly code enforcement update from Brian Scott.
Okay, well, there it is. Obviously, weeds are up a little bit. This is the period from July through September. So generally in July, it's still fairly wet out there, so you're still catching a lot of grass and nuisance or weeds and so forth. So that's up a little bit from last year. Interestingly enough, vehicles are up. And you'll notice in particular, 3rd Ward has almost doubled since last time. So Nilo covers most of the 3rd Ward, and so I asked about that. He's actually kind of noticing a lot of inoperable vehicles. And so it's recreational vehicles that are sitting on the street or sitting in the yard. That's been the case. So like vehicles sitting in the yard or inoperable vehicles sitting up in the driveway without a driver's or license plate or flat tire. So he's kind of gone after that with a vengeance this last quarter. So that number's up a little bit. Exterior maintenance, nuisance, zoning, miscellaneous are all down from last year at this time. A lot of that, frankly, is due to the fact that the guys are in the office more this summer because they've been helping me with building permits, kind of managing the office since Ashley left. So we do have an advertisement out right now for a permit technician. We took that position, kind of revamped a little bit to more of a permit technician. Somebody that really has that skill set to be able to review a set of plans when they come in and make sure everything is there. If it's something that can be issued over the counter, like a fence permit or hot water permit, go ahead and do that right there and then. So we advertised for that a few weeks ago, and we're getting applications and resumes in for that right now. We hope to get that filled shortly.
Whose department is that in? Public Works or Neighborhood Services?
Neighborhood Services, Community Development. One other interesting little tidbit, and I don't have this on a graph here, but I'll show you. You can see that building permit valuation, and this is over the last 10 years or so. So back in 2014, we had a total of 17 million in permit valuation for the year. 2015, that went up to 24 million. Dropped down to 10 million in 2016, went up to 18 million in 2017, and it's August this year, it's 61 million. And that is mostly gateway and mission trails. But we have been busy. We've had some new homes that have come in that we've been issuing permits on, as well as a lot of tenant refinishes, office buildings, Skill Path. I was over there yesterday, a meeting with them about an issue. They are doing some major remodeling in that building right there. So a lot of activity going on in the community this summer. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
And our last item on our agenda is department updates from Laura Smith.
I do have just a couple of things, thank you. So Friday night this week is our first free family fun night of the season at the community center. We do this the first Friday of each month from October through March. So from 5 to 8 p.m., no admission charge. Come check out the facility, swim. They set up the indoor playground and do a variety of things. So it's a great evening, an event for families in our community and an opportunity to market the community center. Also, this year, we're bringing back the Spooky Swim event. If you've been around for a while, you know we used to have a Spooky Swim where they converted the indoor swimming pool to something fun and exciting for the kids. So we will be having the Spooky Swim, which includes a carnival, on the 26th of October, which is a Friday night.
Is Pat the lifeguard for that? 'Cause it'd be pretty spooky.
Pat is not the lifeguard for that. Anyway, if you were, we always invite you to attend all of those events. Also, you may be seeing shortly some press releases and information. You saw a survey recently on the Mission Dog Park group and their work. They had a great response. They had over 450 surveys that were completed. I haven't seen it. They were still at a meeting that I attended last week. They were still compiling all of the surveys that they collected on paper at the Mission Market, and so once they get all of those input, we'll have the opportunity to look at those final results. But they are moving forward with their pop-up dog park event, which will be Saturday, October 27th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Broadmoor Park. Pet costume contest, pet photographer, as I understand, should be a fun day and opportunity for all. Also, just a reminder that we'll have the ribbon cutting for the Mission Trails next week, 4 p.m. So if you have not RSVP'd, you should have received an email for that. If you've not RSVP'd, let me know and we can do that for you. Also, just want to, because when we discussed this earlier, and I went back and looked at the minutes, we weren't specific in our minutes on the dates, but we talked back in July about adjusting our meeting dates in November and December because of a variety of conferences and other events. So just a reminder that in November, the committee meetings will be on the 14th, and the city council meeting will be on the 28th. And then in December, the committee meeting will be on the 12th, and our council meeting will be on the 19th. And that's all I have this evening.
All right. That will adjourn the Community Development Committee meeting.
And I will go ahead and, we're a little early, but we can follow right after the committee meeting. Call our Finance and Administration Committee meeting to order for Wednesday, October 15th. So first up, we have a spot for any public hearing or public comments for items that are not on our agenda. If there's anyone from the public that has anything they'd like to comment on that's not on the agenda. Okay. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and move on. We have one action item tonight, and it's an ordinance authorizing the issuance of industrial revenue bonds for the Gateway projects.
Yes, thank you. So when we approved the most recent redevelopment agreement for the Gateway project in October of last year, it contemplated the issuance of industrial revenue bonds that would be used to provide a sales tax exemption on certain construction materials and labor for the developer. The City Council passed in June a resolution of intent to move forward with the issuance of those IRBs, and we're now ready to actually proceed with the issuance of those. The ordinance that is included in your packet authorizes the issuance of the IRBs in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $214,258,589. As you're aware, we've talked about these the last couple of months, both for the WAK development and the Mission Trails project, but these are not obligations of the city. They are not backed by the city's full faith and credit. And the developer is responsible for reimbursing all costs associated with issuance of those bonds.
Anyone have any questions, discussion on that one?
Take it. Probably not consent on this.
No. It's kind of a large bond issuance. Cool. Well, we can go take that one, council. So that's it for action items. Then we have a discussion item tonight on the Non-Discrimination Ordinance. Just keep in mind this is a discussion item. We're going to have some time for members of the public to comment as well. But I would ask that everyone just keep respectful of everyone's time. And, I'm sure we'll hear from a number of people tonight. So Laura, if you want to give us
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, this is on as a discussion item, so the council will not be taking any formal action tonight. We anticipate that at the end of our conversation, staff will be looking for direction about whether we continue this conversation or what happens from here. So again, this is, I think certainly would entertain public comment, and I know we've got several people here. If you could just give me a quick show of hands if you would like to speak on this issue. Okay. There's a sign-in sheet up here, so as you come, what we would just ask is that you would come to the podium and sign in your name and address for the record, and then make the comments. I think with that, we'll just let the discussion proceed from there. I think we had talked about asking Councilmember Flora to maybe lead off with kind of your proposal and recommendation for bringing this forward to the council, and then we'll move forward from there.
Sure, and just for starters, for anyone looking for further information, if you go to Mission's website and look at our committee packet for this meeting, there's a more detailed memo by myself and also some additional materials, support materials in that packet that I would encourage you to take a look at. So basically, we're here tonight to discuss a non-discrimination ordinance. A local NDO in Mission will provide uniform legal protection within the city of Mission, prohibiting discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, disability, marital status, familial status, or veteran status. So why I believe we need an NDO in Mission. Mission is not immune from anti-LGBT sentiment and discrimination. In fact, in bringing forward this measure under the encouragement of certain constituents, I received a message from another constituent telling me that because of my perceived same-sex sexual orientation, I would never be able to experience a good marriage or raise children. But we don't have to rely on this one anecdote for why this ordinance is necessary. Rather, we know from a multitude of studies and personal accounts from LGBT Americans that they are frequent subjects of discrimination, resulting in harms including disparate poverty rates and higher rates of youth suicide, among other problems. However, despite this discrimination, both state law and federal law fail to protect our LGBT citizens in Mission. So this coverage gap is why I'm bringing this proposal forward. This remains the case even though a recent survey by the nonpartisan Public Religion Research Institute found that the vast majority of Americans say they favor laws that protect LGBT people against discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. Consideration and ultimate passage of the NDO will ensure that Mission is a community where the dignity of all persons is recognized and respected. In addition, we know that passing an NDO is good for business. 91% of Fortune 500 companies include sexual orientation in their own non-discrimination policies, and 83% include gender identity. This measure is supported by Mission's business leaders, including the 5 officers of the Mission Business Partnership, Kevin Fullerton of Springboard Creative, Kathy Casey of Casey's Auto Repair, Sandy Russell, retired of Twisted Sisters Coffee Shop, Kelly Overrocker of Indigo Rose Salon, and Kathy Gilbert of Tailored Hair. In addition, in the packet, you will find letters of support from the Northeast Johnson County Chamber of Commerce. We've also now received a letter of support from the Mid-America Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and we'd be happy to provide a copy if anyone would like a copy of that letter. And Mainstream Coalition, there's also a letter of support from them in tonight's meeting packet. And most significantly, passing an NDO is also reflective of Mission's professed values. Mission prides itself on its reputation as a close-knit but welcoming community. This should include our LGBT residents and employees. In fact, it is already Mission's own policy to protect its LGBT city employees from discrimination, but others in our city remain unprotected. We now have the opportunity to enhance our position as a leader in Northeast Johnson County by joining Roland Park and protecting our LGBT citizens. As you can also see in the packet for tonight's meeting, many of Mission's residents also support the passage of an NDO, and I just wanted to read a few quotes from those letters that echo our city's themes of an inclusive, welcoming community, where they've noted that no matter if your family has lived here for generations or if you've just moved in, Mission is a truly welcoming place. The Mission residents we know are extremely accepting. There are so many wonderful aspects of Mission, and the one that tops it all is its sense of community. And lastly, to adopt a non-discrimination ordinance at this time would put us on the right side of history.
Anyone else have any other discussion before we look for any public comment?
I want to thank Councilwoman Flora for your extensive research and energy that you put towards putting this together. I'm really excited about the prospect of Mission potentially having this come to us, and ultimately I think this could put Mission on really send a message to the rest of Kansas City that we're forward thinking and we're reflecting the values that we say that we share. So I'm excited about it and we would like to see it move forward.
I was hoping we'd have some legal representation, you know.
Mr. Martin should be here this evening, so I can certainly.
I know we're a little
ahead of time. Let me just give him a call.
No big deal.
Okay.
Some of the questions that I have around is just really getting into some of the enforcement of things, and I think there's a lot of unknowns there that we need to work through still. I think it's great to have this discussion, but at this point, we just need to make sure legally too that any ordinance that might get passed is going to make sense, and that there's a fair enforcement mechanism behind it. That's one of my biggest concerns. And,
yeah.
I didn't really see any examples from Roland Park. It sounds like it hasn't really even come up since they passed the ordinance from what I read, but I couldn't find any clear and concrete evidence on that.
And there was a letter from Mayor Mike Kelly that we received right before the meeting, basically saying that they haven't had any problems with the ordinance today. That was passed in 2014.
I think that's part of being proactive about it instead of waiting for something to arise, us being able to step forward and ensure that we're protecting these folks before something was to happen.
What, I'll ask, what is the need that you see here in Mission? Have you seen a lot of anti-gay?
I was approached by particular residents who had asked me to consider this measure. One impetus, I think, was the Adoption Protection Act that passed this spring in the state legislature that made some of our LGBT residents feel vulnerable to discrimination in a way that perhaps they hadn't before. And then also Kansas City, Kansas, back in May, actually the Unified Government, so that covers all of Wyandotte County, plus Kansas City, Kansas, passed their own ordinance, and so I think that kind of got it, back in the news after Roland Park, and so I got some questions following that.
And why hasn't the state or the federal government done it? Do you have any idea? The state of Kansas and other states.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, the state of Kansas is honestly trending in the wrong direction on this issue. This past legislative session, only Kansas and Oklahoma and the entire country passed anti-LGBT measures. And I think what's maybe fitting for, say, Garden City isn't necessarily what's fitting for our city. And so I think thinking of it as an issue of local control, and that we should be passing measures that reflect our local values.
Yeah, you said they passed anti?
Yes.
What did they pass?
They passed the Adoption Protection Act, also known as the Adoption Discrimination Bill, that allows for foster organizations receiving funding to prohibit fostering and adopting by LGBT families.
And although the theory on that would be, from most of us perspective, is to be fair and equitable to anybody, regardless of all those things in Title VII, the concern would be on the adoption process. We don't have any adoption agencies in Mission, and that's who it would be governing.
Yeah, no, that's unrelated to this measure, but Pat was asking. Pat was just asking what led me to bring it forward at this moment in time. I'm saying that after that passed, I heard from some residents that were concerned about LGBT hostility, on a statewide level, and wondering what we could do locally about it.
So you've witnessed or experienced some hostility here in Mission, and if we pass this ordinance, would that change that?
I think it would help send a signal that we're saying that we're a welcoming community and that this isn't going to be acceptable under our laws.
Right.
I mean, it's just like any law, if you think it acts as a deterrent or not. Anything you want to legislate to protect your citizens. Like a speed limit, not everyone's going to obey it, but it encourages people to hopefully act consistent with that matter.
Right.
Ultimately, we have a group of citizens in Mission that are unprotected right now, and so we have to decide whether we want to move forward in further discussing this. And I'd like to, because I have some of the same kind of
Unprotected from what?
Unprotected from discrimination. I
Really?
mean, yeah, public accommodation, housing. If an LGBTQ person could walk into any business in Mission and be actively discriminated against, and there's no legal action they can take to
Or
counter
be
that.
fired when their employer finds out.
So do we
Well,
have
not
something in
really.
place?
I
that
mean, not
protects
legally
somebody
without
outside
cause.
of
That's why we
the
did
LGBT?
it.
So currently, and Laura might have a better understanding of this too, we rely on federal and state law, and the state and federal law do not protect this group of citizens.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said legally, I don't believe that can happen without some kind of cause or whatever.
You can.
Yes.
I don't think so. That's why we Dave was here.
Well,
And
and
that's a
that's
common misconception, is
Yeah.
that this isn't a protected class, and it's not.
I know it's not a protected class,
Right.
but neither am I. But a guy can't just fire me for no cause either.
usually they can. But,
Yeah.
but if we forward this on from being a discussion item, then we can have our legal counsel look at this and look at all of these angles that are coming up.
Yeah, I mean,
We're not passing an ordinance tonight, we just move
Yeah,
it
no,
forward for
that-
discussion.
to me, that's the important thing, is to iron out just some of the details, and like I said, some of the enforcement things I think are a little confusing or concerning me. I don't know. That's where I think we need some more legal guidance on some of that.
Right. And we
I
want to
think
make sure
it's a
that
good discussion to
that
have.
if we pass an ordinance, and we're not infringing on somebody else's rights. You know, or
Absolutely.
freedoms.
And because this is a broad spectrum issue and a topic, why is it that we're not pushing for the federal government to adopt this across the board? So if someone went from Mission to Overland Park, they'd still be protected.
Well, I think those discussions are also happening and that there are national organizations pushing for that. It's whether you want to have to wait to rely on the state and federal government to do everything for our
I would
city.
tell you that those of us who go to the National League of Cities, this is where you should bring this topic up, because those issues go directly to Congress. And that would be a topic, a strong topic, that it doesn't just fit this box here. Every time you travel from one community to another, it would be applicable across the board. It seems to me like consistency in measuring, non-discrimination should be the topic of concern to me. I mean, I want to see everybody protected for all the right reasons. That's something I do believe the federal government should get involved in.
Right, and so I guess the question is, if you think there should be incremental change to protect our own residents while we're waiting for that to happen.
And municipalities across the country are adopting similar
Yeah.
NDOs, and so it's just.
21
Because
states.
States across the country have adopted that.
Also
That's, I
municipalities.
mean, I know, but that is a little bit of a challenge when you get into certain things when you don't have that at the state level. I mean, to me, it's I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like this is really getting into a lot of the states' rights territory. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be having this discussion too.
Yeah, I mean, Wyandotte County is the, I think, second largest county in Kansas, and went through their whole process and just passed in May.
And what I might suggest, because I think probably based on some of the public comment, the council may have some other issues or things that they may want to consider or think about getting additional information on. I know Dave Martin should be here momentarily, he's on his way, so we might want to move to that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to any members of the public that would want to speak. So anybody that would like to come on speak, please first sign in and state your name and address for the record, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Gail Robertson, and I live off of Rock Creek Lane, right by the Gateway Project. And I just wanted to give some information about, briefly, literally I wasn't going to speak until this exact moment, about what it means to be an at-will state in Kansas. And what that basically means is that, for the most part, with the exception of protected classes, you can be fired from a position of employment or leave a position of employment for no reason at all, literally, or for any reason. And those are both existing in the law. So no reason or any reason. That's what an at-will state means. What that means is that somebody like myself could be fired from a job in Mission because of the status of my sexuality. Including, to be quite honest, somebody could fire you if they thought you were too white.
Right.
I mean, quite honestly.
And whether you had this ordinance passed or not, they could still do it.
No, that is not true. Because when you pass a non-discrimination ordinance, you actually create a protection for those individuals.
can't fire.
Correct.
Anyone who's in a protected status, you can have a fire.
For that reason.
For that reason.
You cannot fire somebody
But it's
for the
reasons,
protection.
yeah.
So you could still fire them, for example,
They show for work late every day.
correct, if you show up late for every day, it does not matter. If you show up late for every day, of course,
Right.
you can fire them. If they show up late for every day and they happen to also be, let's say, for example, I'll give you a very real example, somebody I actually know. Somebody who failed, despite ADA accommodations, to meet their job requirements. So the business of employment created ADA accommodations to allow them to work at disability status, right? It's a protected class. They created accommodations for them in the workplace. That individual still failed to meet those requirements with a contract of ADA accommodations, okay? They were fired. Right. They still had a protected class. They were fired because they did not meet the accommodation with work agreement, okay? I, as a person, could have that same existence, right? And if I'm not protected for a class, let's say like an LGBT class, right? Somebody could instead say, I'm going to fire you because I don't agree with your sexuality. And that could be the only reason they fire me. I could be a perfect employee, I could show up to work every single day, and they could fire me. That's what it means to work in an at-will state. And our current state as a whole has that. So this, to me, says that you're creating a space that says, no, that's not okay. That you can fire somebody for being late at work. You can't fire for somebody for having a partner that's the same sex.
So in the past the ordinance, someone who was under that guise of that special status were protected, would be protected, but I wouldn't be, right? As far as getting fired, they can still fire me for no reason.
It would
I'm not a
depend.
protected
You
class.
could, if you could have a company ran by an LGBT person who says, I don't want any straight people working here. And so then they would no longer be able to fire you because of your sexual orientation if this passed. So it would work both ways.
Well, I think that one scenario. Interesting. Hey, thank you. That's good information, though, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll go.
Hi, I'm Kansas State Senator Mary Pelcher Cook, and I want to thank you, Mayor Appletop and council members, for allowing me to speak to this group tonight. I do have copies of my testimony if you would like a copy of it. As you can imagine, this issue comes up on the state level, and I think this proposal has good intentions, but it will be detrimental to religious liberty and harmful to the economic growth for the businesses in this community. All people, and I agree, and I read the packet, and I agree with some of the statements in there. I do believe that people living and working in Mission do deserve to be recognized as valued members of every community, worthy of our respect and fair treatment. But that's not what the proposal does. The proposal, in fact, does not provide uniform legal protection, but instead will cause unjust discrimination where none existed before. I'm not aware of any legal cases pending right now in the whole state of Kansas on this issue. And there is already non-discrimination protections on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, disability, marital status, marital status. I'm not sure about the familial status. The things that have been added are the sexual orientation and the gender identity. Everything else is already protected. The sexual orientation and gender identity are behaviors They are not immutable characteristics like the rest of the protections are. Please, please consider the human person made in the image and likeness of God, who cannot adequately be described by his or her sexual orientation. Everyone has challenges with personal problems and difficulties, as well as talents, but it's offensive to reduce individuals to specific traits. That is the degrading effect this proposal would have, and it would not only be harmful to a business practicing its religious liberty with unnecessary regulation and hurdles to jump, it would also be limiting and destructive to the human person whom you are seeking to protect. There are all types of businesses that cater to different niches, to different likes and dislikes. It's the foundation of our free market system. Businesses spring up or they fail based on how well they meet the demands of the consumer. This city council would do well to encourage that marketplace instead of looking at imposing demands that impede the economic growth. And since you brought up the Adoption Protection Act in Kansas, let me explain what that legislation actually does. It does not discriminate against people who are in same-sex relationships who want to adopt children. It does nothing to impede that, nothing at all. What it does do is protect different organizations who believe that a child is best placed with a mother and a father, that is the best type of home for a child to grow up in. So they have a mother and a father. And it also caters to the women or the parents who want to give their child up for adoption, and they want to ensure that their child has a mother and a father. Now, why do we have to have that law in Kansas? Because we haven't had the problem before. Because they've closed faith-based organizations in other states. Because the discrimination is actually the other way around. There are those who want to force faith-based organizations to place children in homes where there are same-sex relationships. There are organizations that can still do that in Kansas. There is nothing that stops that. What it does say, what the law that we passed does say, that a faith-based organization cannot be sued if they place a child with a mother and a father. And I'd be glad to stand for questions. There's someone else who's going to be speaking behind me who has a lot of detail too.
Senator, if I could ask you a question on that, the Adoption Protection Act, the groups that you were talking about that it protects, I don't even know if, like Catholic Charities, I'm a little bit familiar with, but wouldn't that group be exempt anyway, or?
What has happened, yes, in the past they have been, but what has happened in other states, even though they were exempt, there have laws been passed like this one,
Right.
which then allow lawsuits to go forward to shut those organizations down. And it's happened in Illinois, it's happened in Boston, I believe New York, and I think Eric may have a few others. He probably has a list where this has happened.
Well,
So,
the reason I ask is, like I said, I'm a little bit familiar with Catholic Charities, but I was just wondering, are there other non-religious groups, so they're not affiliated with a church or religious order, that are needing that type of protection?
Well, and everyone receives that type of protection. And I would also say that there's also organizations, including that are affiliated with the state, who will find same-sex couples and place children
Sure.
in those homes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Cook, do you mind sharing which district you represent and which cities in the?
Yes, City of Shawnee, Lake Quivira, Southern Miriam, and 2 precincts in Evelyn Park. But I'm glad I came since the Adoption Protection Act came up, and it's clear that people didn't really know what happened with that legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we need a copy.
Sure.
Would you like us back or maybe not?
Sorry, just writing down my address. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but since someone chose to drag my religion into this issue, I feel obligated to speak up. I am a lifelong, devout Christian, and I take issue with the idea that this non-discrimination ordinance would interfere. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Alex Welch, and I live in Mission Ward 3. Good catch.
That was exciting.
Yes, I want to connect with you. I'm very excited to meet you. Anyway, I take issue with the idea that a non-discrimination ordinance would interfere with mine or any Christian or any person's religious practice. I feel this ordinance would have no effect to stop me from praying before I go to bed at night, from reading my Bible when I wake up in the morning, or attending religious services on Sundays. Furthermore, I don't believe that the right to fire someone for being gay or evict LGBT tenant is a religious practice in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe most religions allow for that kind of behavior as an actual religious practice. Furthermore, this ordinance would have nothing to do to negatively impact perhaps a Christian landlord or a Christian business owner who has concerns with the LGBT community. It does not seek to shut down their businesses or force them to take their house off the market. It simply asks that they give everyone a fair shot, that they hire the best person for the job and keep them as long as they're doing well, that they choose their tenants fairly. I think it's important to separate these issues of what is a business matter and what is a personal matter. And I don't think that this discriminates against someone who is a Christian or any other religion, because that is not, I don't feel, a fair exercise of their religion. Thanks.
Good evening. My name's Andy Sandler. I live over in Millhaven, Ward 4, and I appreciate the opportunity to stand in support of this. Enter and sign in, please. My statement is pretty short. It's just one page. Single-spaced, but 16-point font. But I would like to... This is something I'd like to add before I read from it. Since we're still dealing with hypotheticals, since the ordinance hasn't been formally introduced, and since Councilmember Quinn did have some hypothetical suppositions, I'd like to add one of my own. Let's just say there isn't an ordinance, for the sake of argument, there isn't an ordinance to put smoke detectors in houses. Do we have to wait until somebody dies in a fire before we pass an ordinance? Or do we be proactive? Because discrimination does happen, it's happened elsewhere. We don't need to have it happen here. We can be in the forefront. We can be one of the growing number of cities in both Kansas and the rest of the country who says hate has no home in our hometown. And now I'll read. Thank you for indulging me. The city of Mission has for years been a place I'm proud to call home. From the time we moved into town 2 decades ago, my wife and I, every neighbor we've encountered has been welcoming and accepting of all those around us. Millhaven is not the most diverse neighborhood in town, but our own little patch of it belies that. It has been an impressive amalgam of ethnic, sexual, and religious harmony, and I believe it serves as a guidepost to even greater acceptance and human kindness in our city at large. An ordinance that puts those values of acceptance and protection of a diverse populace into law would be an outstanding example and a strong message to those who for no good reason oppose kindness and tolerance of all well-meaning people. Creating a non-discrimination ordinance would put Michigan in an honored and enviable place in the Kansas landscape, and certainly in the nation's, as a place that truly looks ahead and brings all of its people along on the journey forward. We would be joining a proud, progressive, and growing number of communities eager to put into public policy the values of decency toward our neighbors, a policy that will attract and retain good people who simply wish to pursue the happiness that has been enshrined as our unalienable right. This is a human rights issue. I humbly urge you and your fellow council members to craft a non-discrimination clause that puts on notice for all that hatred has no home in our city, either among our neighbors or in our government. Those who already share our values should find nothing objectionable about this, and those who do not share these values must know that this community cares far too much to allow their intolerance to stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Appletoft and members of the council. Let me begin by saying thank you. Public service like yours is a thankless job often, and it takes a lot of your time and a lot of your effort, and you make very little, if any, money for doing it. And I just want to express my gratitude to you for being the public servants that you are.
Can we hear what's your name?
My name is Eric Tietzel, and I am a resident of Lenexa. I'm also the president and executive director of the Family Policy Alliance of Kansas. We represent individuals and families in Mission and across our state who share our desire to make Kansas the best place in America to live, to work, and to raise a family. And I'm here tonight to voice our opposition to the proposed ordinance relating to sexual orientation and gender identity. I believe the intentions of this ordinance are caring, and I was nodding along wholeheartedly when I read the opening line of the memo from Councilwoman Florida, who wrote, "All people living and working in Mission deserve to be recognized as valued members of our community, worthy of our respect and of fair treatment." Indeed. In fact, this principle is the reason that I oppose the ordinance. It brings disunity where there is unity. Far from affirming the beautiful tapestry of diversity among the citizens of Mission, the ordinance unnecessarily divides friends and neighbors along hotly contested ideological lines. We need look no further than our neighbor to the west for evidence of this. Colorado baker Jack Phillips was forced to pay large fines and lost much of his business because he declined to create a custom wedding cake for a same-sex ceremony, which would have been an act in violation of his faith. Jack regularly made other items for his friends in the LGBTQ community, but he was punished for drawing a line at a certain point. The state of Colorado's punishment of Jack Phillips did not recognize him as a valued member of the community, worthy of respect and fair treatment, a fact that was confirmed by Justice Kennedy's majority opinion in the recent Masterpiece Cake Shop decision. I could go on, but for the sake of time, I'll ignore similar examples from Oregon and New Mexico and Washington State. This isn't the way that Mission operates, and this isn't the reputation that Mission wants. This isn't how Mission treats its small business owners. Councilwoman Florida rightly called this law or this ordinance a deterrent. She's right, it's a deterrent to people of faith living and working in light of their sincerely held religious beliefs. This ordinance gives shallow nods to religious protections. I believe it exempts churches. But it sends a strong message to anyone who doesn't work for a religious organization or whose business has succeeded beyond a certain point, that they aren't free to live out their faith beyond merely the walls of their home or their church. Mission is and has always been a lovely, inviting place to raise a family and run a business. In fact, in her memo, Councilwoman Flora makes a compelling case that this ordinance is unnecessary because, as she said, over 90% of Fortune 500 companies are already choosing to implement their own non-discrimination policies voluntarily, including AT&T, the U.S. Post Office, Intercom, Cox Automotive, and others that she mentioned right here. If there are concerns about discrimination in Mission, and it sounds like there aren't, they should be addressed through the civil channels that are already in place. I have a feeling, based on this conversation, that if the citizens of Mission agree a business is acting wrongly, that business won't be around for very much longer in this city. Our government should not criminalize people of faith for living out their faith at work. So I ask, and we ask, that you vote against the ordinance. Believe in the people of Mission. Kind, warm, loving, and inviting people are able to have different beliefs, yet live and work together in peace. Thank you very much for your time. I have copies of my testimony, which I'll leave here, and we'll stay around if you have any questions.
I'm Jen Hill, City Council member from Roland Park, Ward 2. I just want to come tonight and thank this council for taking this brave step. Moving forward with this non-discrimination ordinance, I encourage you to reach out to the City of Roland Park. We are happy to assist in the process. And just remember that no one is, the people who keep coming to you saying, oh, you're persecuting us by this non-discrimination ordinance, that's out of fear. And they're afraid that their religion is not going to be the first religion up front with them anymore. We need to protect everyone. There's no one or no one's religion that is being persecuted. We are trying to help people. Well, I'm just really proud of you guys. So I urge you to push this forward. I urge you to remember that our job is to keep in mind the separation of church and state. And again, give us a call if you need us.
Joan, do you have any example of how that has made any differences over in Roland Park?
We have not had a single religious group persecuted because of our non-discrimination ordinance.
Have you had any complaints filed from anyone that was concerned about discrimination since the ordinance was passed?
Off the top of my head, not that I know of. I would have to do
I tried to look into it. I couldn't find anything. I was just curious.
I would have to do some research and check. Again, it's a proactive movement. It's not meant to, you know, to get someone. We really just want to make sure that everyone is treated equal.
Sure.
I do
Now, we
believe
understand the proactive part.
in speaking with the city administrator, I don't believe they've had a complaint that's been filed in the 4 years since the ordinance was passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Nay. I live off of Fox's Drive in Ward 3, and I'm speaking in favor of this ordinance. Speaking as a gay man, I would ask that you consider the human side of this. I grew up in Lewisburg, Kansas, in Miami County. A small town, small high school. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody's business. Sorry, a little nervous. Wasn't expecting to speak tonight. I grew up scared of conveying who I really was. I saw a couple other kids in my school face bullying and the kind of ridicule they faced. and it took a while to really accept it and be able to show who I was and who I wanted to love. As an adult, as I've gotten into the working world, I just asked you to think about that. I always have to second guess when talking to new coworkers, or even when I'm just looking for a new place to live. I second guess expressing, like, if I'm in a relationship, what pronouns do I use when I'm talking about a significant other? Just for fear that I know that they can reject me. I can get fired for being in a relationship with another man. And so it's always a guessing game of, do I truly reveal those aspects of my personal life that many heterosexual people are able to share without a second thought? And I think, and although there may not have been any cases of discrimination in Mission, as a resident here for about 3.5 years, I do consider it home and I do love it here. And I think passing an ordinance such as this would convey a message that all are welcome and you can be your full self while in this city. And I would strongly urge our council members to pass this ordinance and send that message so people like myself can grow up without having to worry about that fear, apply for a job or apply for housing, without having to worry about finding another option just because of who we love. And that's all I have.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You mentioned that you wanted to feel like your full self here. You've been at Mission for a while. Do you not feel like your full self here in Mission now? Or does this ordinance make that much difference to you?
Anytime it's not just Mission. Anytime I go into a new business just wanting to buy something, seek a service, I always have in the back of my mind, hiding, if any of that kind of conversation comes up, hiding that part of myself, even if it's just in passing, or isn't related. You know, you talk about your personal life sometimes when it comes just to interacting with people in the world. And it's always in the back of my mind, and I constantly have this guard up of having to think about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it to people, not knowing how they feel and whether they would refuse service or refuse a job or housing.
Yeah, I understand that. I know this particular ordinance probably wouldn't address that, but it'd be a first step, at least for Mission. And man, I'm sorry that the I guess atmosphere in our country is still that way, where you have to feel like that, and others as well. So.
And I would feel passing this ordinance would help with that. Kids knowing as they grow up in Mission that they can share that without facing those kind of ramifications for being who they are, I think would send a great message to those growing up like I did with depression and fighting all those thoughts, and just starting there at that level, I think would help and send that message.
I appreciate you getting up and speaking.
Thank you.
Just going to take a minute to write this down.
Long name.
I got you beat.
Big. You do, absolutely. No competition there. My name is Caroline Dawson. I live in Ward 1 on Dearborn Street. I wanted to speak to some words that I heard earlier that I thought may be worth clarifying. There was a reference earlier to sexual identity and gender identity as being behaviors. This is not the way the American Psychiatric Association identifies what those words mean. It is not a commonly understood way that what those words mean. So I wanted to take a moment to clarify. So gender identity. This is a person's sense of femaleness or maleness, or not either one of those things. And so if that is a behavior, that doesn't make any sense. It's a sense of self. It's not actually about an action. Okay? Sexual identity. This is the sense a human has of who they are attracted to in a sexual sense. It is also not a behavior. It is a sense of attraction. Having sex is a behavior. Who you choose to have sex with is a decision that results in a behavior. But in fact, your just sense of self is your internal understanding. And I would ask everyone in the room just to take a moment and answer this question for themselves inside their own head, not out loud. At what point, at what age, please answer this for yourself, did you know you were your gender? At what age did you know you were the gender that you identify as? When did you know? And was there a behavior that told you that? No. At what age did you know who you were attracted to? These aren't decisions. These aren't behaviors. Gender identity and sexual identity is a sense of who they are. And if we look at the language that's in the ordinance, there's reference to marital status and veteran status. Whether or not I join the military is a behavior. Whether or not I join the military is an action that I take, and I gain a certain status of being a veteran. Whether or not I get married is indicative of then my marital status. It is a behavior that I engage in. So my gender identity and my sexual identity aren't behaviors. They're understandings of who I am as a person. So I don't feel it was correctly identified earlier, so I wanted to take a moment to clarify that. Also, I absolutely support this ordinance in mission. I think that it would go a very long way to being on the right side of history and creating a very clear message that everyone is respected. And I take issue with anyone implying that faith is a problem here. It is not a problem to my faith. And so to globally say that this is an issue for people of faith, that person's not speaking for me. And so I wanted to make that position clear. So if there are any questions about gender identity and sexual identity, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What does she do? Social worker.
An educator.
No. Just kidding.
My name is Andy Hyman.
Can you phrase that in the form of a question, sir?
Yes. What is? No. I live at 5638 Woodson Road. I wrote you all a letter. I said everything I want to say in that letter. I trust that you've read it. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time rehashing what I said in the letter because I used to be a journalist and I sat through a ton of meetings like this where everybody got up and said the same thing over and over again. And I said it in the letter, and so I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say anything about that anymore, except for the benefit of the people who haven't read it. I believe, at the very core of my being, that this, I'm in favor of this non-discrimination ordinance, and I believe, at the core of my being, that it's fundamental to why I live in this city. This city is great because we're a welcoming place. And I said it better in the letter, so I'm going to stop. However, the one thing I want to underline is you all rock. I mean, I said that in the letter too, but it is, your job is hard, as the gentleman who spoke before said. And I trust you all that you'll listen to the constituents and everybody here, and you'll weigh and do the job that we all elected you to do. And I wanted to say that I appreciate you doing that very much, and that's about it. So thank you all for doing that job. I appreciate it a good deal, and I strongly support the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you for humoring me as I take comments, right? I live in Kansas City, Missouri, but I heard about this about 2 hours ago.
What was your name?
Sorry, Debbie Jackson, and in my rush to run over here, I severely burned my arm as I was trying to cook really quickly, so I should have probably gone to the ER, but this matters to me, so you might not be able to read my name, because I can hardly read my own scribbles of the notes that I took to come here. I wanted to introduce myself to you because I have a transgender child, and even though I live in Kansas City, Missouri, she was born in Kansas because we live right on the state line, and because of her existence, I have become an advocate for trans youth, and I now actually work for the National Center for Transgender Equality based in DC as one of their family organizers. I appreciate the questions about why is this not being taken care of at the national level. We are working on that. It's called the Equality Act, and we are working on that actively. But I would also like to point out that there are many, many, many court cases that have come down on the side of LGBT citizens based on Title VII, Title IX, and the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Those have happened in the First Circuit, the 6th, the 7th, the 9th, the 10th. And as noted in the packet, we are in the 10th. But when the way that the court system works, when you start to see a pattern in the courts, things don't always necessarily have to get to the Supreme Court to be decided. What the courts have specifically or explicitly been determining for LGBT people for the last couple of decades is that discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation are actual forms of sex discrimination. So as the other person pointed out, and I was able to scratch out of my notes, while veteran status and marital status are protected classes in many of these ordinances, those are behaviors and choices. Sex discrimination, as it applies to gender identity or sexual orientation, are technically covered, according to many courts, as sex discrimination because the perceived offender is not performing sex or gender the way that other people believe that they should. A transgender girl like my daughter, for instance, isn't performing her sex as boy, as some people would believe that she should. If you have a masculine female and she doesn't wear dresses or a lot of makeup and has a what's considered a masculine haircut, she's not performing femininity according to what some people in society say. So if there is discrimination based on those characteristics, that is sex-based discrimination. Just in 2017, there were 8 rulings in favor of LGBT people, and there have been 11 so far in 2018 in district courts across the country. And that does apply to employment, housing, healthcare, education, and so on. So now you're saying, great, so you're indicating to us that all of this is taken care of at the federal level. Why do we need to do anything here? Well, some of these cases have been going on for 4, 5, 6 years. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and it takes, more importantly, tons of emotional energy for someone to get up and defend their very existence and why they should not face this kind of discrimination. And that's asking a lot of people to put themselves out there for a really long amount of time and perform that emotional labor for the community when you have it in your power to end that discrimination right here and right now in the city of Mission. As part of our work at NCTE, we do a survey of transgender adults We're getting ready to put the next one out, but our last one was in 2015. We surveyed about 29,000 trans adults across the United States. We ended up with a couple hundred in the state of Kansas, and you can find our breakout report of discrimination faced by the trans community in Kansas. I can send you a link to that later. I didn't think to get it to you before coming. Just so you understand the kind of discrimination that people do face, out of our respondents, 15% who have been employed reported losing a job in their lifetime because of their gender identity or expression. In the last year, 29% of those who held a job or applied reported being fired, denied a promotion, or not being hired because of their gender identity or expression. 22% of our respondents in Kansas reported some form of housing discrimination. 29% of the respondents who visited a place of public accommodation where staff or employees thought or knew that they were trans experienced mistreatment, including denial of service, verbal harassment, or even being physically attacked. And 83% of those who were perceived as trans or who were out as trans during their kindergarten through 12 years experienced mistreatment, including verbal harassment, assault, prohibitions on dress and restroom access, and harsher disciplines in school. Our survey is anonymous. There's no way to know if any of those respondents were in mission. I would certainly hope that they weren't, but if it's not explicitly in your non-discrimination protections, how would you know? They have no mechanism to report to you. We do know that discrimination happens on both sides of the state line here, and I think this would go a long way in letting the people of this community know that you do have their backs if they were to face that.
So I have one question for you. My understanding, and I'm sure you're way more well-versed in this, is that the 10th Circuit has not ruled to protect.
The 10th Circuit has not.
Which is where we are.
That's where we are. Again, it's in circuits across the country, and a lot of times it just takes the right suit being moved up the chain. And a lot of times things are settled and sent back down before they are. We've seen that time and time again. But again, there are very few that ever end up being ruled against the LGBT person when they do make a discrimination complaint. And like I said, 11 just in this year alone. And we are not living in the most LGBT affirming time, particularly at the federal level right now. So to see that those are continuing to be ruled in the favor of LGBT people is very promising.
Debbie, who do you work for?
National Center for Transgender Equality.
Okay, thanks.
The district courts that are hearing these cases, do they recognize or support cities where there's an ordinance in place?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I will say I am not an attorney, so they give me limited bandwidth on how I can pretend to be an attorney in public. I don't play one on TV, and I don't intend to play one right now. But yes, we support cities, states, and obviously working on the Equality Act at the federal level with writing the language for non-discrimination policies and support them in passage. There are times that policies are written up by people who think they're being super supportive of the LGBT community, and something in the language actually ends up being problematic. And our policy team, that's what they do review. And I believe this is based on Roland Park's non-discrimination policy and a couple of others that are in the state of Kansas, and those have all been reviewed very positively.
You didn't answer the question.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe I didn't clarify. The court hearings that are taking place, the 11 or so that you referenced, are they in cities or areas where there's a current non-discrimination ordinance in place?
Oh, okay, sorry. I don't know. I would have to go back and look at some of the individual ones. They are taking place in places where it has been healthcare discrimination, which is at the national level. In employment discrimination, right now one of them which cites the 14th Amendment Equal Protections Clause is against the federal government because of the potential ban on transgender people serving in the military. So there are a number of different areas of law that they cover, and I would certainly be happy to
get an
I
answer
guess
for
the
you on
rationale
that.
for me asking that is if they have in the current city that someone resides in where they did potentially discriminate against based on housing, just as an example, if they have an ordinance in place currently on a non-discriminatory level, and they're still having to go to court, I'm just trying to find out exactly how well stood that ordinance is at the court level.
At the court level, they tend to hold, and one thing I will point out is in mentioning the Masterpiece Cake issue, because Colorado does offer some protections, and there were ordinances in place there. Justice Kennedy actually very specifically said that his ruling is not giving any sort of allowance for discrimination against the LGBT community. It was specifically religious animus expressed by people on the commission in how they responded to the complaint. So he said, go back, do it again if you have to. You responded negatively because of religion, and if you hadn't done that, your non-discrimination policy would have withstood.
That's not what he said.
And
It is what he said.
my
That is not what
understanding,
Justice Kennedy said.
It absolutely is.
I think some of the cases, and Debbie up here can correct me if I'm wrong for Debbie down here, is that most of the litigation that you're discussing is federal law where petitioners are requesting that the courts interpret existing prohibitions on sex discrimination to include sexual orientation and gender identity, right?
Yes.
So you're talking about that, you're not talking about state or local court litigation about non-discrimination ordinances.
Yeah, most of it is their interpretations based on sex as the underlying characteristic.
Okay, and let me ask, and possibly ignorance on my part, this ordinance that deals with employment and public housing and accommodation, would that cake scenario be defined under public accommodation because it's a service that wasn't rendered to that, or would that even cover that?
In my understanding, again, not being an attorney, and I believe you have attorneys coming to speak, yes, it should, because the interpretation was that this was a characteristic of art, and they get into very finite issues of when is it an artistic expression or not. But if the same cake had been commissioned by someone else, it would have been delivered as a service. So that was discrimination based on religion and religious beliefs versus public, the ability for anyone to come in from public to have the same service. And again, I don't want to try to explain in non-legalese the very legal restrictions there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope your arm feels better. Thank you.
Good evening. I promise I will be very quick because I'm sure we all want to go home, especially me, which is right down the street. My name is Tony Blanc. I live here in Mission in the 3rd Ward, Parks and Arts. Thank you. I live here right on 61st Street. So the best part is when I want to come, I can actually just walk down here.
That's not Ward 3.
What?
That's not Ward 3.
Oh,
Ward 4.
is it? Well, actually, 61st Street actually is the divider.
Depends on which.
I'm on the north side.
That's Ward 2.
Ward 2.
Is it? RC is my, all I know is I voted for RC, so.
There you go.
Did I have my numbers off?
You did. You're 2.
Thank you. Well, this is a very contentious issue, obviously, and so I thank you for at least bringing it up. I'll first of all admit I've lived here in Mission since 1991, and I call Mission my home. I love Mission. I've been here since Sylvester Powell Jr. still was the mayor, and didn't want to spend any money on anything, actually, but we can all look back. I'm a gay man. I was also adopted through Catholic Charities and put into a very religious Catholic home. They did actually have some issues, actually, with me growing up gay. So I've actually had a little bit of experience with some of all these topics. It's kind of fun to say, well, I've done that, did that, did that. But one of the things I thought was always interesting is that the nice senator from Kansas came up here and she was talking about what's protected by the state of Kansas. And one of the things that she mentioned was religion. And it is. Religion is one of the things that the state of Kansas is deemed worthy of protecting. And Me, as if I was owned a cake shop and she came to me and wanted to have a religious cake, I would have to do that based on the state of Kansas. Whether she be Christian or Hindu or Wiccan, I cannot discriminate based on her religion. So, I just wanted to point that out. And I love Mission. And I just want to anecdotally tell you one story that may not be of Mission, but it shows a little bit of discrimination. My friend was getting married. She's given her a wonderful Catholic family, and her Catholic family wanted her to have a big wedding, but she decided she was going to elope. And she called me and says, "Tony, I need you at my wedding. There's only going to be 5 of us, and we're all going to go." I said, "Cool. Well, I have a big reception." She goes, I have reservations at this hotel. Just call them. We're going to go there. We're going to get married, and then we're going to have our own little private celebration. Then we're going to come back and have our reception. So I said, great. I call down there and say, hey, my name is Anthony Blanc. I need to make a reservation. I'd like to have a king-size room. And my husband, William Wilson, I get a long pause, and he goes, "Sorry, we don't accept same-sex couples at our hotel." So I was devastated, not so much because I couldn't go, but because now I became the reason my friend actually was going to have to confront something for her wedding. She actually called the hotel, incredulous, and after it was said and done, we moved the entire wedding party. And I still love her to this day because of that. But I'm just showing you a little bit of what can happen actually when things like this and people can be discriminated against for no other reason than the person that we choose to love. And I don't say choose, maybe that's a little light, because I think it was pointed out that I didn't just wake up and decide to be gay. I woke up actually in a cold sweat at KU after classes thinking, oh my God, Tony, you're gay, you're just going to have to deal with this for once in your life. And that's how I moved forward. And I told my family, and they had problems with it, and we dealt with that too. So, as a mission resident, I'm going to deal with this, I'm going to move forward. But I'm at least going to come up here and express my support for this ordinance. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Tony makes a good point there about the free marketplace too, though, you know. If people are that way, and sorry that you had that experience, and sorry there are people that are that way, but when they aren't, you do have the option of not doing business with them, taking your business elsewhere, which I would hope you would do.
Or we have the option of not having those kind of businesses in Mission.
Well, I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about anywhere. He wasn't in this.
Right.
Hi everyone, I wasn't going to speak like several others said, but then I realized I had a couple things to say. So as I write, my name is Jeff Harris. I am not a resident of Mission, but I am at, saying it as I write, 2512 West 51st Street, up in Westwood. So I'm your neighbor to the northeast. I want to make a couple points, and the first one I want to make is, so I respect what the challenge that's ahead of you if you decide to take this forward, because I'm also an elected official. I'm on Westwood City Council. So I spent a lot of time trying to think about, all right, what are the parts of an argument I need to think about or listen to, or what is the evidence or lines of thinking I need to have in front of me so I make a good decision in my capacity as an elected official. So a couple points I want to make, they kind of come from that point of view, because again, I suspect this is probably going to go forward as I think it should. So the first thing is, and two of the other speakers already talked about this, I want to come back to the comment about sexual orientation and gender identity being behaviors. Someone already kind of made a comment about this, but that is scientifically incorrect. There is a great deal of biological evidence, neurological evidence, and increasingly genetic evidence that there are underlying, mainly genetic factors that lead to a person's orientation and identity. And that argument was kind of over in professional communities many decades ago. The second thing I would say about the comment around behavior is, it is profoundly disrespectful to continue to tell members of the LGBT community that core parts of their identity are choices. profoundly disrespectful. If, as you go through this discussion and you listen to members of the public or you seek out sources of information, if you see a line of argument that identity is behavior, you should reject that wholesale. The second point I want to make is, I think Maya Angelou said this, I might be wrong, so please don't quote me. But I think many of you have heard this line, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. What you are going to hear from some of the opponents of an NDO is a lot of language that tries to cloak an underlying desire to discriminate. They will want to reserve the right to prevent people from coming, kind of like we just talked, into the public marketplace and receiving goods and services just like everybody else. That's discrimination. Believe them when they say that. And then the last thing I want to say, and this is a bit more high level, but I've been in a lot of these discussions and I think this is what's going to happen. And you've already seen a little bit of it tonight. So I think there's going to be two themes that underlie kind of the two sides of this argument. So I don't think anyone kind of questions too much that people of minority sexual orientations or people of minority gender identities historically have been underrepresented and don't have as much power, and there's lots of ways to talk about power, but don't have as much power as people in the majority orientations or majority identities. So the themes I think you're going to see are the people who are going to oppose this. The theme is they will want to retain their power. They will want to retain control. The theme I think you're going to see for supporters of this NDO, and you've already seen it a couple times tonight, the theme's going to be, I want to feel safe, and I want to be treated the same because I haven't been historically. And again, those are themes about a population that historically has had power and control, and a population that historically has not had power and control. And so, back to being an elected official, clearly in our structure of government, you as elected officials, we as elected officials, we have a responsibility to make sure we're listening to and taking care of and treating equally all those people, whether they have power or not. Thank you.
Well said. Do you know if Westwood is considering any similar ordinance right now?
Not yet, but I think, like Councilman Flores said, it's certainly kind of on the move. We've already kind of mentioned the unified government of Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County. We've already mentioned Roland Park, which was 4 years ago. I'm sure anyone who reads Shawnee Mission Post knows about, there was an attempt to have a discussion about an NDO in Prairie Village. Has that been just a week ago? Or 2 weeks ago? So there was an attempt to have a discussion in Prairie Village. And I think, again, as we've also talked about, some of it's coming from the adoption bill that happened earlier this year at the state level that's prompted a lot of discussion. But to answer your question, no, there's been no direct conversation in the city of Westwood, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's on the way.
One comment that Jeff made about Prairie Village reminded me that I wanted to interject just on the record that council members Inman and Davis have long planned vacations, and that's why they are not with us here this evening. Thank you, Jeff.
Good evening.
Yes, it is.
I need to fill all this out, or do we?
Is it on record?
Oh, yeah, good point, I'll tell you what, I'll fill out the first part and then finish it so we can get out of here. My name is Kevin Fullerton. I am a resident, 20-year resident of Mission. I'm in Ward 2. I'm also the owner of Springboard Creative in downtown Mission, and I am the president of the Mission Business Partnership. Before I say anything else, I want to say I'm not here speaking on behalf of the business partnership. I just wanted you to know part of my relationship to the city. Right there. Actually, the things I really wanted to say earlier, Andy said so perfectly that I will skip all of that. Nice job, by the way. But I do want to speak on behalf of the businesses, because we've talked a lot about this. This is a very emotional issue. This can be a decisive issue as well. And so for me, I have trouble thinking about it logically because I'm like, it's just the right thing to do as far as doing this. But when I've heard people talking about it hurting businesses, sorry, I'm trying to watch my language. That's not correct. It does not hurt the businesses, it helps them. And the reason I told you I'm the president of Mission Business Partnership is because when people are coming to move their businesses to Mission, they come and talk to me. I can't tell you how many people I've had in my studio asking me about Mission. What's it like to own a business in Mission? What are the people of Mission like? And I can tell you that I sell the hell out of this city because I love it, I believe in it, I believe this is the best place to be. I'm going to be carried out of this city in a box, I can tell you that. So if we weren't to pass something like this, I would have trouble selling this city. I really would, because I would not move into my business to a city that has said we will not back up people because of whatever reason as far as discrimination goes. For me, discrimination's that red line. We don't cross it. We need to, this helps us bring people in the city. That helps us bring businesses. That helps me recruit employees here. Something like this NDO is very good for the businesses within this city. And thank you. I appreciate your time. I'll fill this out later. Any questions? I'm sorry. No?
I wonder if maybe, go ahead.
That'll be faster. I'm Alexis Penny. I'm at 5718 Outlook in Ward 2. You know, I love Mission. I love it so much. I've lived in every borough of this fine metropolitan area, and I've never found any place that has a small town feel with, you know, urban conveniences. I want to just point out today that everyone that has spoke so impassioned and from the heart supporting this ordinance, those are our residents. Those are our voters. Those are the people that make this a community. And we do have people here today from outside of Mission that were opposed, but those aren't Mission residents. Those aren't people that live their lives here. They're not people that have friends and neighbors in Mission. And I think that's just a very important thing to keep in mind when we're listening to people speak.
Very good point.
Thank you.
Well, well, go ahead. We would like to do up here. I just wanted to say that when I came in here tonight and I saw this on the agenda, I just wanted to know two things. Is this something that we really needed here in Mission? And I think you guys have addressed that for you. I would tend to lean toward, yeah, we probably do need that. And then I want to make sure that it's not going to infringe on anybody else's rights. There's been some comments about that, but that's something that we definitely need to weigh out and make sure. If it's not, it's something that we need in Mission for sure. So I say we definitely need a little bit more discussion on this item. Hopefully we'll be able to move it through. But Dave?
Sir. Mr. Martin, I'm wondering if you have any comments of, after reading through some of the proposed ordinances, you wanted to, I guess, enlighten us at all about some of the options for enforcement mechanism and how would this play out if we did get a report of some discrimination that happened, or what?
My own personal bias
Dave,
is...
would you identify yourself?
Dave Martin, City Attorney. My own preference is to keep whatever mechanism is as simple as possible, not get a
10-person committee or...
Right, but that's up to staff to make recommendations to you. I'm confident we can get options for you to consider. I'm confident we can draw a simple process if that's what the council desires. And, at this stage, it's, do you want to move the discussion forward? And then we can take that as a challenge to prepare an action item for you and all of that. I'll just say I spent a little time thinking about adding the word contractor in that, and I don't think that makes a substantive decision on the impact of the ordinance. If people work in Mission, have employees in Mission, have housing in Mission, and behavior that we define as contrary to the ordinance occurs in Mission, then we have the right to enforce it, whether that word's in there or not. But it's all what happens here in our city. That's all we can legislate.
Right.
So.
Great.
Do you have any other legal?
Well, you know, I got this packet Friday. I'm not an EEOC lawyer, and I was impressed, in a sense, reading through it a couple times, how similar all the different, to me there's more similarity in, it's a simple decision, do you want an ordinance or not? And it's not as complicated on its face as it appears to be. If you all have any specific questions about any specific topics that you want me to get better educated on, I'm happy to do it. From everything I've read, and we're all citizens of the United States and read the paper, I don't see any serious, per se, interference with passing such an ordinance. I don't think that Supreme Court case answered the question at all about whether that behavior is a religious question or not. I think the jury's still out on that, and everybody's got their own personal opinions about that. But I don't see any prohibition on moving the discussion forward legally.
Any questions? No? Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to get up to speak? If not, I think we can. I appreciate everyone for coming out tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Speaking. Sure. It's great to hear from everybody.
I would like just to make one correction.
Okay.
Somebody said that if somebody from a religion came in and asked him to make a cake for their religion, that person would have to make it. They would not have to make that. They would not have to provide that service. So I just wanted to make that clear.
I mean, reading from the statute, it seems to, so I would actually prefer a lawyer answer our disagreement.
Well, we don't have a formally drafted ordinance yet, so I don't want to try to get too deep into any specifics about how things are written at this point. I think if we move forward with that and get an action item with an ordinance that's drafted up, we can have some more of those technical discussions. But at this point, I feel like I've had enough discussion and heard from enough people to determine whether or not I want to move forward. So,
so just as a point of clarification, because I didn't see who from the back of the room, so the issue that you're looking for clarification on is this discrimination in the provision of services, and so kind of the example of the Colorado baker versus, I think the example that was given about...
Well, the example that was given, and this is current law, so as an attorney I think you could speak to it, and that is if there was a Catholic cake shop and a Jewish person walked in and wanted that person to design a Jewish wedding cake, and for some reason the Catholic said, I don't want to make that cake for Jewish religion, because it's part of my creative services, that person would not have to make that cake.
But that's where we're asking for clarification. I don't think tonight's the forum to decide that. I just want to make sure what we're researching.
Can I just reframe the question? So I think the question would be, as Dave said was his initial understanding, is that the Supreme Court opinion left open that question, and so we would be confirming Dave's intuition that that question was left open by all
I'm
right
happy to get you a more thoughtful answer.
Right, yeah.
I just want to make
I
sure
think
that
that's the
we're
question.
spending time on the right question.
Yep, did the Supreme Court actually rule on that question, one way or the other?
For what it's worth, as an opponent, I agree with the city attorney. The Supreme Court has not answered the question of whether such ordinances are constitutional or unconstitutional. It is still an open question. The reason they rejected the Colorado Human Rights Commission's decision on Jack Phillips was because of the way Phillips was treated by the commission as a person of faith. They have not yet answered the fundamental question.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, I think we can go ahead and, do we need to take any formal action about?
Some questions I think we would have is, do you want any additional discussion? Are you ready to move this to the action item stage? Are there other stakeholder groups? Because we did. I mean, the packet came out was posted on Friday, and so, what time or what opportunities would you like us to engage the business community? I think also it's important to engage the property managers as well as building properties, because it certainly has an impact for them, and then make sure that our citizens as well have the opportunity. So I think we would look for some direction around how to help move this forward.
Well, I would think that we could move it next month to an action item, and then obviously we'll be discussing the action item, and if we didn't want to move it to council at that point, we'd still hold it off. Yeah, for another month or so.
And I think giving us,
Give us that option.
and the month until November would give us time to engage, if you wanted to put a notice on the website that it will be an action item on our November meeting, then any stakeholder groups, could come.
Okay.
So I think the question is, as council, and I'm not part of council at this point.
You're not included.
Do we want to move this forward? Do we want staff to draft an ordinance? We don't have an ordinance, so we can see language. And then I think what Laura was asking was, is there more education needed for our community? This is a big issue. We want to make sure there's due diligence, there's proper discussion had, and when is the time to bring it to the next committee to be actionable?
So I think we would need to see that ordinance draft first. And then
Well, and that's part of my question, I guess. How do you see that? I mean, do you want to see that draft as an action item, or do you want to see that as a discussion item?
Well, I think it's twofold. We have a what, which is the ordinance, and then we have a how, which is how do you implement any governance over that ordinance criteria.
Well, that would be in the ordinance. That would be part of the ordinance.
Yeah, that's spelled out in the ordinance.
I mean, I think it could be an action item, and I agree with Pat that we could, invite people to come hear it and discuss at our committee meeting, and if we feel like there are people who still haven't gotten to say their piece, we could always hold it over if necessary, but rather than delaying just to delay.
I do think, to your point though, also Laura, that it would be good for us to be proactive and reach out to the business community and some of the property owners and just get some initial feedback from them, and if need be, maybe hold a public forum if we have to. I think it's going to be important to run that by a lot of the business stakeholders.
I'll let them see the draft of the ordinance as well. So let them show up for people. Question. Or statement.
Good. All right, well, if nobody else has anything further, I think we can, actually, sorry, there is space for department updates, so if we have anything else there.
Just one quick thing, actually, just a reminder that next week we also have the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation breakfast. I think many of you are scheduled to attend Thursday morning. And then I think we will see, we've been meeting, I think some of you know we've been meeting for the better part of the last year with the Rolling Court Homes Association residents on resolving some of their issues that occurred after a heavy rain event last year, and we've had some great conversations and some success, and I think we'll see some solutions coming forward in the coming months, which is an exciting prospect.
A lot of digging going on.
There's a lot of dirt moving in this city. Right.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The show. Yeah.
Yeah. I only say this because Nick Cannon is here and has been waiting quite a while. And
I don't want to think that we just wasted his time, so.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Show and
Yeah.
tell. I forgot we
Totally sorry.
No, you're okay. I don't,
If you guys want to stay, you can, and we're going to talk about external vests. If you want to stay
Personal
or-
protective equipment for
Yeah,
the
if
police
you
officers.
leave, that's fine too. I'll try to wait. So I promise this is only going to take 2 minutes. We'll wait a second for people to go.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Randel. Oh, absolutely.
Come on, glad hander. Get your butt back in your chair. You think for the police toys, he'd be front and center.
Okay.
All right.
Again, I'll make this pretty brief. As you can tell, we look a little different. As far as the vest that we are wearing, I've been in the city for 21 years. This is the police uniform. Years and years ago, the military started getting into outer carriers. The panels that he has inside this outer carrier is the same panels that I have on the inside of this vest. The vests have gotten much lighter weight, but I will tell you, in the summertime, it is extremely hot, and when especially a motorcycle officer is out riding the motorcycle in the evening time at 100-degree heat, that's hot, because they do ride all year round unless there's snow or ice on the ground. I agreed that we were going to take a look at these. You've seen different officers on different shifts, male, female, supervisors, wheel officers wearing these. We wanted to bring this before you and show this to you. These vests are something that we are looking at moving the officers to if they so choose that they want to wear them. Each officer each year is given so much money in a clothing allowance to go to the police uniform store and buy different things that are all work related. This would cost us no extra money. If Officer Kanan wants to go and he wants to buy this, it's specific. You can only buy this one with this gear on it. So it's not going to cost the city any more money, but what this does is when he goes out in 100-degree heat, works an accident, and comes back to the police station to write his report, he can take this off in, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, probably about 15 seconds, put it over the back of the chair, sit in the station where it's air conditioning, and allows his body to cool down faster.
Who makes that?
There's 5 or 6 different companies that we've tested.
This one is Point Blank.
Where's it from? Where's it located, the business that makes it?
Here in Johnson County.
Really?
Well, the company is, so these other companies are all over the country that sell this stuff.
One in Johnson County that makes those?
Not in Johnson County, but there are 3 places in Johnson County that sell this type of stuff.
Okay.
So where it's made officially, I don't know. I'll tell you that Gulls is actually located in Florida, and they're also in Lexington, Kentucky. Sorry, Point Blank is in Florida. So,
So does he have to go there to get it?
no, that's why we use the vendors here. But I do care because I want the officers to be able to cool down. If I wear what I'm wearing right now, which is what I'm used to wearing, out in that heat and you come back in the air conditioning, you're not cooling down, which isn't good. Now, my biggest concern is 1, what's the cost, and 2 is how fast can he get it back on if there's a disturbance at Pat's house, since Pat's not standing in here. How fast can they do it? Because every second can count. So, not that I'm going to put him on the clock, but I'm going to ask him to take that off and then put it back on for you, so that you can see roughly what this looks like for him to be able to take that off and put it back on.
What's it made out of then?
So it's just the actual carrier itself is just a nylon product. And this is not going to be as fast because I don't have the panels in it, so it's a little more flimsy than it would typically be. But it just comes off in one solid piece. All the equipment stays on it. And then when that hot call comes out, I think I can beat the fireman.
So this is an option, not that we can switch everybody to it?
Right. So if Officer Kanan wants to purchase this, he can use, it's called chip money, C-H-I-T. You can use your equipment or chip money to actually go out and you can purchase this. The officers can only buy one of them. Then the next question was, what about the shirts? Because the shirts are rather expensive that we wear, and these all have pockets just like this does, and I don't want to wear these shirts out because this is what I wear every day. So they came up with, and I'll let you guys feel what this material looks like. This shirt right here is cheaper than the shirt that I'm wearing, and this is the shirt that would actually go underneath it. It is the exact same color. There'd be patches on both sides. So you wouldn't know if we're wearing this shirt or that shirt, but that shirt is going to fray much less.
Does that come in short sleeve?
It does come in short sleeve as well. And again, I told everybody earlier that won't fit me.
What's the force said? Have you talked to them about these?
They like it. I don't want to pay extra money, the same money that we're paying for these. This is the shirt that goes under because there's no pockets on the front or anything like that. As you can see, he wears his badge on the outside. His name is etched up here and it says police on the front and back.
Those were the city administrator's questions, things like, I mean, obviously safety is the number one issue, so, and we provide, so the officer, I want to be very clear, the officer is never required to buy the panels that go into their vest, regardless of which option they choose. You know, and so my questions were along the lines of how do we identify if we're going to have a different look, if you encounter an officer on the street and they're not dressed the same, you know, we want to be able to make sure that we can identify. But I think the other option too, and I know several were not on the council a few years ago when we looked at a proposal, but this also allows, you know, Officer Kanan to get some of that equipment off of his belt and carry and distribute the weight of that equipment a little bit more evenly and differently off of his hips. Which is an issue and a concern for some of our officers. So it provides an option there as well, just in terms of physical
What is the
impact.
weight that you have on, like with what you have on right now, what you have in the pockets, what's the weight of that?
A full load without this, so like what the chief is wearing with the vest and the belt, is typically 30 to 35 pounds. So my belt, being that I've been able to lift most of this off the belt onto the carrier itself, I mean, I didn't exactly weigh it, but I would say it's at least half of a weight reduction.
That's good.
And it's more, you know, I feel like the upper body is more designed to carry weight than your hips. And it's more distributed, so. But yeah, as far as the belt goes, I would say the weight reduction is probably about half.
And then the exact same panels go inside.
Right. And then this carrier also allows us, so on the front and back, so for like active shooter situations, there's pockets built in that we can drop rifle plates into. So we have carriers now that the chief and our command staff went out and purchased for us that are in the back of each patrol car that have rifle plates in them, but they're just in each patrol car, so they're not fitted to each officer. So it's not like you go in the back, grab it, and it immediately fits. You have to throw it on, cinch it down, versus this, if we were to go to, God forbid this ever happened, but an active shooter at one of our elementary schools, we could get out, grab the plates out of the back of the car, throw them in and go.
You get those from Alomar or?
So, yeah, Gauls, Alomar, GT is about to open.
Get me one.
But as Laura pointed out, the vest that I wear is the same panels that he wears. Those are about $800 a piece, and those are bought every 5 years. The tactical vest that he's talking about that has the rifle plates, those are about $1,400 a piece, and there's one in every one of those police cars.
This is terrible, but if you gain weight, does it expand?
And they're adjustable the same
So,
way, yeah.
well, I think you can phrase it a little differently. You start hitting the weight room and getting better shape.
Yeah.
Why would you ask Kate?
So with this vest, so say when it gets cold out, you have to wear a jacket underneath the vest, so you have access to it. But actually with this vest, quick adjustments under this flap right here, so that you don't have to take it off, put your jacket on, then put it on. Okay, it doesn't fit, take it off, make some adjustments, put it on, it still doesn't fit. You just put the jacket on. Once you have it on and you get your vest cinched up, you can just move these to make fit adjustments. So, and also in answer to your question, when you're fitted for a vest, typically they fit you with an inch or two of overlap. So that's designed for protection, not weight gain, but it's a built-in.
You can gain a little. So, but we wanted to bring this before you and show it to you. The officers have been on the street for the last few months wearing these. This is something that we are, the shirts would be the first thing that got bought between now and the end of the year with the officers' money that they have left over. And then starting January 1st, they would be able to buy these outer carriers if they so choose, or you can continue to wear the standard uniform. But we wanted to bring it before you and show it to you, and at least get your guys' opinion on it.
Have you had any negative feedback about anybody who's had one of them?
Is there a place on there for the camera?
Yep, so I mean, with all this Molly on here, I just put my body camera right here and I put my mic pack from the dash cam right next to it. Another great feature is it just, you're not reaching around on your belt for things, it's all right here. So, I mean, everything on my belt with the exception of a pair of handcuffs is from the side of my hips forward and up on the front of the vest too.
Has there been any concern of, whenever you're arresting someone or somebody possibly having kind of easy access to everything's right there and
They should, one, never be that close to you, but some of the ones that we tried downstairs, the panels and everything that he has are not as attached, and that was one concern that I had Kirk play around with some of these a little bit. Are they easy to grab? Will they rip off? Or can I manipulate him and throw him around using this? Because that's what I don't want. And this is the best one out of all. So.
Did somebody in a police force help design this?
It came out of the military. Military's had these for years. And then usually it gets to law enforcement about 5 years later. So, but most of the departments around us are carrying something similar to this. But with dehydration and that kind of stuff, and we want to care about the people that are out serving, we want them to be able to cool down.
It's a great option.
So,
Thank you.
All right. Hey, you work tonight?
I work 7 to 3 today, so I'm fixing to go home and sleep and then come back at 7.